The fluorescent lights hummed that particular frequency that only comes from bulbs about to die, that high-pitched whine that makes your teeth ache. Melissa Parker pressed her palm against the cold marble of County General Hospital's reception counter, feeling the veins of gold running through the stone, wondering if anyone else knew these counters cost more than most people's cars. The sharp antiseptic smell mixed with something else, fear maybe, or desperation. The kind that clings to parents who've run out of options. In her trembling hands, a manila folder contained everything that mattered: Harper's medical records, insurance denial letters, and a surgery estimate that might as well have been written in a foreign language for all the sense it made to her teacher's assistant's salary, $175,000. The numbers blurred as she blinked back tears. Deep breaths, she whispered to herself, adjusting the worn strap of her purse. 5-year-old Harper was at her mother's house, probably asking why Mommy looked so scared lately, why she cried in the bathroom when she thought no one was listening. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, looked up from her computer screen. Her name tag read, Patty. And unlike the cold efficiency Melissa had encountered at other hospitals, Patty's smile seemed genuine. "I'm here to see Dr. Reynolds about my daughter's surgery," Melissa said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Of course, Miss Parker. Please take a seat. Dr. Reynolds will be with you shortly." Patty's voice carried genuine sympathy, making Melissa wonder if her desperation was that obvious to everyone who looked at her. The waiting area buzzed with typical Tuesday morning energy. Shoes clicking against tile, hushed phone conversations, the rustle of magazines no one was actually reading. Melissa sank into an uncomfortable plastic chair that had seen better decades, staring at the stack of papers that would determine whether her daughter lived or died. Not in so many words, of course. The doctors were careful never to put it quite so bluntly. But when a 5-year-old's heart is failing and surgery costs more than most people's houses, the math was simple and brutal. She'd already borrowed from everyone. Her mother, her sister, 3 different friends who'd maxed out their own credit cards to help. The online fundraiser had raised $12,000, which felt like a fortune until she subtracted it from $175,000. Her insurance would cover maybe 40% if she was lucky. The rest might as well have been $1 million. "Miss Parker." Dr. Reynolds appeared in the doorway, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of confident bearing that came from years of delivering both miracles and heartbreak to families like hers. His office was small, but organized medical diplomas crowding the walls like expensive wallpaper. He gestured for her to sit across from his desk, which was cluttered with patient files and coffee-stained papers that suggested he'd been here since before dawn. "Miss Parker, I've reviewed Harper's latest tests." His tone was professional, yet gentle, the voice of someone who'd learned to balance honesty with compassion. "The condition is progressing faster than we initially anticipated. We need to schedule the surgery for next week." The words hit her like cold water. "Next week, but I thought we had at least a month to—" She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say, "to find the money," out loud, as if speaking it would make the impossibility more real. Dr. Reynolds leaned forward, clasping his hands on the desk. "Harper's heart can't wait that long. The good news is that Dr. Gabriela Martinez has agreed to perform the surgery. She's one of the best pediatric cardiac surgeons in the country." Melissa nodded. She'd spent countless sleepless nights researching Dr. Martinez, reading about her success rates, her innovations in pediatric cardiac care. In another life, in a world where money wasn't a factor, this would be cause for celebration. "But Dr. Reynolds, I need to be honest. I don't have the full amount for the surgery yet. The insurance will cover 40%, and I've raised some through the online fundraiser, but I'm still short by about $80,000. The numbers tasted bitter in her mouth. Dr. Reynolds sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "There are payment plans available, and the hospital does have some financial assistance programs. Let me connect you with our financial counselor after we're done here." Payment plans, financial assistance, words that sounded helpful until you realized they were just different ways of saying, "not enough." Melissa had already applied for every medical charity she could find, had filled out forms until her hand cramped, had waited on hold with insurance companies until she memorized their hold music. Time was the one thing Harper didn't have, and bureaucracy moved at its own glacial pace. "I'll sign whatever I need to sign," she said, finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "My daughter needs this surgery. I'll figure out the money somehow." Dr. Reynolds handed her a thick packet of forms. "The surgical consent forms are on top. The financial paperwork is beneath that. Our coordinator will go through everything with you." Monica, the surgical coordinator, was efficiency personified. Crisp white coat clipboard in hand. The kind of professional competence that should have been reassuring, but somehow made everything feel more final. They spent an hour in a small conference room going through each document, Melissa initialing and signing mechanically, while her mind drifted to Harper. Sweet Harper, with her missing front tooth and wild curly hair that refused to stay in ponytails. Harper, who loved dinosaurs and could name every constellation in the night sky, who was too young to understand why her heart made her so tired all the time, why Mommy cried when she thought no one was looking. "Miss Parker," Monica's voice pulled her back to the present. "This is the final consent form for the surgery itself." Melissa's hand shook as she signed her name, the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders like a physical burden. Every signature was another step deeper into debt she'd never be able to climb out of, but what choice did she have? "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll schedule Harper's pre-surgical appointments and give you all the information about the day of the procedure," Monica explained, gathering the signed papers with practiced efficiency. "As for the financial aspects, you'll need to meet with Mr. Davis from our billing department. He's expecting you." The billing department occupied a corner of the third floor, all sterile cubicles and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Mr. Davis was a thin man with a perpetual frown who didn't look up from his computer when Melissa entered his office. His desk was pristine, except for a single stack of papers and a coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest Dad," a touch of humanity that seemed at odds with his cold demeanor. "Miss Parker, I understand you're still significantly short on the required payment for your daughter's procedure," he said without preamble, his eyes still fixed on his screen. "Yes, but I'm working on it. I've taken a second job and the fundraiser is still active. I can provide a down payment of—" Mr. Davis cut her off with a raised hand. "Hospital policy requires at least 60% of the cost to be secured before scheduling surgery, except in immediate life-threatening emergencies. Your daughter's condition, while serious, doesn't meet the emergency criteria according to our guidelines." The room seemed to tilt. "What are you saying? Dr. Reynolds just told me Harper needs this surgery next week." "I'm saying that until the financial requirements are met, we can't schedule the procedure." He finally looked up at her, his expression unchanged. "I suggest you explore additional fundraising options, or perhaps seek treatment at a state hospital that might have different payment policies." "A state hospital wouldn't have Dr. Martinez," Melissa said, her voice rising with desperation. "Please, there must be something." A knock on the door interrupted them. A woman in a crisp charcoal suit appeared in the doorway, her presence immediately commanding attention. She was tall, probably in her 50s, with dark hair streaked with silver, and the kind of bearing that suggested she was accustomed to being the smartest person in any room she entered. "Mr. Davis, I need to speak with you immediately." Mr. Davis stood quickly, his entire demeanor shifting from bureaucratic indifference to something approaching deference. "Ms. Collins, I wasn't aware you were visiting this department today." The woman, Ms. Collins, turned to Melissa with piercing blue eyes that seemed to assess her in an instant. Despite her obvious authority, there was something in her expression that wasn't entirely cold, a flicker of something that might have been understanding. "This is Ms. Parker," Mr. Davis continued. "She's here about her daughter's surgery next week. I'm Victoria Collins, CEO of County General." The woman said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to raise it to be heard. "Would you excuse us for a moment, Miss Parker?" Before Melissa could respond, Victoria and Mr. Davis stepped outside, leaving her alone with her mounting panic. Through the glass partition, she could see them engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. Victoria's expression was controlled but firm, while Mr. Davis looked increasingly uncomfortable, gesturing toward his computer screen and then toward Melissa. The conversation lasted maybe 3 minutes, but it felt like an hour. When they returned, Victoria closed the door behind them and took the seat next to Melissa. Up close, there was something almost familiar about her features, though Melissa was certain they'd never met. "Miss Parker," Victoria said, her voice unexpectedly warm. "I've been informed about your daughter's situation." She paused, her eyes holding Melissa's gaze steadily. "I want you to know something important." Another pause waited with significance. "You and Harper are not alone in this." The words hung in the air between them, carrying a promise that Melissa didn't dare believe, even as hope began to uncurl in her chest for the first time in weeks. Victoria Collins's words hung in the air between them, and Melissa found herself momentarily speechless. The hospital CEO reached over and placed a hand lightly on Melissa's forearm, a gesture so unexpected and personal that it sent a shiver of confusion through her already overwhelmed system. "I apologize for Mr. Davis's approach." Victoria continued, shooting a pointed glance at the billing manager, who now seemed intensely focused on straightening papers on his desk with the kind of precision usually reserved for origami. "While we do have financial protocols, we also have a commitment to providing care, especially for children in critical situations." Melissa swallowed hard, afraid to hope, afraid to breathe too deeply, in case this moment shattered like everything else had. "What exactly does that mean for Harper's surgery?" Victoria's posture softened slightly, though she maintained the poised demeanor of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected hundreds of lives daily. The afternoon light streaming through the office windows caught the silver threads in her dark hair, creating an almost ethereal quality that made her seem less like a corporate executive and more like some kind of guardian angel in an expensive suit. "It means we're going to proceed with scheduling your daughter's surgery for next week as Dr. Reynolds recommended. The financial details will be worked out, but they won't delay Harper's care." "I don't understand," Melissa said, her voice barely above a whisper. The hope in her chest was growing, but she'd been disappointed too many times to trust it completely. "Mr. Davis just said." Mr. Davis was following standard protocol, Victoria interrupted smoothly, her tone carrying just enough authority to make it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "But I'm implementing an exception in this case." She turned to the billing manager, who had gone very still behind his desk. "Please process Ms. Parker's case under the Children's Cardiac Care Initiative, effective immediately." Mr. Davis's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment he looked like he might argue. Then something in Victoria's expression stopped him cold, and he simply nodded. "Yes, Ms. Collins, I'll update the system right away." Victoria stood, indicating the conversation with Mr. Davis was concluded. "Ms. Parker, would you join me for coffee in my office? I think we have more to discuss." Still stunned by this unexpected turn, Melissa gathered her belongings and followed Victoria through the hospital corridors. Staff members nodded respectfully as they passed, some looking surprised to see the CEO personally escorting a patient's parent. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Victoria seemed lost in thought, occasionally glancing at Melissa with an expression she couldn't quite read. Victoria's office was a world apart from the sterile hospital spaces below. Large windows overlooked the city skyline, and the room featured comfortable furniture, original artwork on the walls, and fresh flowers on a side table. It felt more like an upscale living room than an executive office, all warm wood and soft lighting that made the harsh fluorescence downstairs seem even more institutional by comparison. "Please sit." Victoria gestured to a small seating area as she asked her assistant to bring in coffee. The assistant, a young man with an efficient manner and expensive glasses, appeared with a silver tray that held real china cups, not the disposable hospital coffee cups Melissa had expected. Once they were settled with steaming mugs, Victoria leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Parker, may I call you Melissa?" "Yes, of course." Melissa nodded, still trying to process what was happening. The coffee was excellent, clearly not from the hospital cafeteria, and she found herself wondering what other luxuries were hidden away in this executive tower, while families like hers struggled with basic care. "Melissa, the Children's Cardiac Care Initiative I mentioned is a special program we're developing at County General." Victoria explained, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug in a gesture that seemed almost vulnerable. It's designed to ensure that children with complex cardiac conditions receive timely care regardless of their family's financial situation. I've never heard of it, Melissa said cautiously. Something about Victoria's explanation felt rehearsed, like a presentation she'd given before to hospital boards or potential donors. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes, a brief shadow that was quickly replaced by her professional demeanor. It's relatively new, she said, and truthfully, still in development. Your daughter Harper will be among the first patients to benefit from it. Melissa set down her coffee cup, studying Victoria's face. Why Harper? Why us? There must be other families in similar situations. The question that had been nagging at her since this morning finally found voice. What makes our case special? Victoria was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider her words carefully. She turned toward the window, her profile sharp against the afternoon light. There are many families facing similar challenges, and eventually the program will help many of them. But implementation takes time, and we needed to start somewhere. She paused, turning back to face Melissa. Your case came to my attention, and I made a decision. The answer felt incomplete, like there were layers Victoria wasn't ready to share. But Melissa couldn't bring herself to question this unexpected lifeline too aggressively. Instead, she simply said, I don't know how to thank you. Your gratitude isn't necessary, Victoria replied, but her voice carried a warmth that contradicted the formality of her words. But there is something I'd like to discuss with you. She set her coffee down and folded her hands in her lap, a gesture that reminded Melissa of her own mother whenever she had something important to say. This initiative needs a public face. Stories that demonstrate its impact. With your permission, we'd like to document Harper's journey through surgery and recovery. Melissa hesitated. The idea of putting Harper's medical crisis on display even for a good cause made her stomach tighten. You mean like using her in promotional materials? Yes, indeed. Nothing exploitative, Victoria assured her, quickly leaning forward with an intensity that suggested this mattered deeply to her. Just the opportunity to share your story to help us secure more funding for similar cases in the future. You would have full approval rights over anything before it's shared publicly. It seemed a small price to pay for Harper's life. What was privacy compared to survival? I think that would be fine, Melissa agreed, as long as it doesn't interfere with her recovery. Excellent. Victoria smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression Melissa had seen from her. Now let me tell you more about what to expect next week. Dr. Martinez is truly remarkable. I've known her for years, and there's no one I would trust more for a complex pediatric cardiac procedure. As Victoria continued speaking about the surgical team and recovery process, Melissa found her thoughts drifting to Harper. How would she explain all this to a 5-year-old? Harper knew she had a special heart that needed to be fixed, but the concepts of surgery and hospital stays were frightening even for adults. The idea that complete strangers might be paying for her daughter's care would be impossible for a child to understand. Ms. Parker, Victoria's voice pulled her back to the present. Are you all right? Yes, sorry. Melissa blinked, realizing she'd been staring out the window without seeing anything. It's just a lot to take in. Yesterday, I was terrified we wouldn't be able to afford the surgery at all. And now, Victoria nodded understandingly. It's overwhelming, I'm sure, but try to focus on the positive. Harper will get the care she needs. That's what matters most. They spent another hour going over details, pre-surgical appointments, what to expect during recovery, how the hospital's social services team would help coordinate everything. Victoria personally walked Melissa back to the main lobby, promising that her assistant would be in touch tomorrow with all the specific scheduling information. Thank you again, Melissa said as they reached the entrance. The afternoon sun was starting to slant through the glass doors, painting everything in golden light that made the whole day feel surreal. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in today. Victoria's expression changed almost imperceptibly, a shadow passing across her features. Take care of your daughter, Melissa. That's all that matters now. The week leading up to Harper's surgery passed in a blur of pre-operative appointments, paperwork, and preparations that felt both urgent and dreamlike. Through it all, Victoria's promise held true. Melissa wasn't asked for additional payments, and everyone she encountered at the hospital treated her with unexpected deference, as if word had spread that she was under the personal protection of the CEO. On Tuesday, they met with Dr. Martinez for the pre-surgical consultation. The surgeon was exactly as advertised, confident without being arrogant, warm without being condescending. She explained the procedure in terms both Melissa and Harper could understand, using a child-sized anatomical model to show Harper exactly what would happen to her special heart. "Will it hurt?" Harper asked, clutching her stuffed dinosaur closer to her chest. "You'll be fast asleep the whole time," Dr. Martinez promised. "When you wake up, your chest might feel sore, but we have special medicine to make sure you're comfortable, and then your heart will work so much better." Harper seemed to consider this information with the gravity of a much older child. "Like getting a super heart." Dr. Martinez's smile was genuine, exactly like getting a super heart. Wednesday brought blood work and additional imaging. Thursday, a meeting with the anesthesiologist who would be monitoring Harper during surgery. Each appointment reinforced that this was really happening, that somehow, miraculously, her daughter was going to get the care she needed. Friday evening, as Melissa was organizing Harper's favorite stuffed animals to bring to the hospital, her phone rang. The caller ID showed County General Hospital. "Hello, Melissa, it's Victoria Collins." The CEO's voice was as composed as ever, but there was something different about it, a personal quality that hadn't been there during their office meeting. "I wanted to check in personally before tomorrow. How are you and Harper holding up?" The question caught Melissa off guard. It seemed unusually personal coming from a hospital administrator, even one who had taken a special interest in their case. "We're as ready as we can be," she replied. "Harper's nervous, but trying to be brave. She says her heart is excited to become a super heart tomorrow." Victoria's laugh sounded surprisingly genuine, not the practiced chuckle of a corporate executive, but something warmer. "She sounds like a remarkable child." "She is," Melissa agreed, settling into her favorite chair as Harper played quietly in the next room. "Ms. Collins, Victoria, I can't help wondering, why did our case specifically come to your attention? There must be dozens of families facing similar financial challenges with critical surgeries." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds, long enough for Melissa to wonder if the call had been dropped. When Victoria finally spoke, her tone was carefully measured, as if she were choosing each word with deliberate precision. "Let's just say I have a personal interest in pediatric cardiac care," she said. "I make it a point to review certain cases that come through our hospital." It wasn't really an answer, and they both knew it. Before Melissa could press further, Victoria smoothly changed the subject. "I wanted to let you know that I'll be at the hospital tomorrow morning. If you need anything at all, my assistant will make sure it reaches me immediately." "That's very kind of you," Melissa said, her curiosity about this woman's unusual level of involvement growing stronger by the day. "Not at all," Victoria responded. "Get some rest tonight, Melissa. Tomorrow is an important day for all of us." After ending the call, Melissa sat in her chair for a long time, turning her phone over in her hands thoughtfully. There was more to Victoria Collins's interest in Harper's case than professional concern or public relations for a new hospital initiative. The question was, what and why did it matter so much? As she tucked Harper into bed that night, Melissa pushed aside her questions and focused on comforting her daughter. "Tomorrow your Super Heart adventure begins," she whispered, stroking Harper's curls. "Promise you'll be right there with me?" Harper asked, sleepily clutching her favorite dinosaur plushie. "Promise," Melissa answered, kissing her forehead. "You're not alone, sweetheart. We're not alone anymore." The morning of Harper's surgery arrived with the gentle pink glow of dawn breaking through Melissa's bedroom window. She had managed maybe 2 hours of actual sleep, alternating between checking on Harper and pacing the small apartment, her mind racing with both hope and residual fear that had become her constant companions. They arrived at County General at 7:15, 45 minutes before the scheduled check-in time. The hospital had a different energy in the early morning, quieter, more subdued, with the night shift staff completing their rounds and the day shift just beginning to arrive. As they approached the pediatric admissions desk, Melissa was surprised to see Victoria Collins already waiting in the lobby. The CEO was dressed more casually than during their previous meetings, slacks and a blue blouse rather than her formal suit, but she still carried herself with the same commanding presence that seemed to part crowds without effort. "Good morning, Melissa." Victoria greeted them warmly before bending slightly to address Harper. "And you must be Harper. I've heard so much about you." Harper, usually shy around strangers, unexpectedly smiled up at this elegant woman who seemed to glow with importance. "Are you a doctor?" "No, sweetheart." Victoria laughed softly, and Melissa was struck again by how genuine her interactions with Harper seemed. "I help run the hospital, but Dr. Martinez, who's going to fix your special heart today, is one of the best doctors in the whole world." "Better than Dr. Rexford on Dino Hospital?" Harper asked, seriously referencing her favorite children's television show. Victoria's eyes crinkled with genuine amusement. "Even better than Dr. Rexford." She then turned to Melissa, her expression shifting to something more businesslike but still warm. "I've arranged for you to use our private waiting area during the surgery. It's more comfortable and you'll have some privacy. Dr. Martinez will come there personally to update you after the procedure." "That's really not necessary," Melissa began, but Victoria shook her head firmly. "I insist. It's the least we can do." The admissions process moved with surprising efficiency. Within 30 minutes, Harper was changed into a child-sized hospital gown decorated with colorful animals, her dinosaur socks still proudly on display. A kind nurse named Ben placed a hospital ID bracelet on her tiny wrist and explained every step of the preparation process in terms Harper could understand. "Look, Mommy, I have a special bracelet just like Princess Tiana when she goes to the ball," Harper said, admiring the plastic band. "It's beautiful," Melissa agreed, fighting back tears that seemed to come at the most unexpected moments. How could her daughter remain so positive, so innocent, in the face of something so frightening? Dr. Reynolds arrived to check Harper's vitals one final time before surgery. "Everything looks good," he assured Melissa with the confident manner that had first impressed her. "Dr. Martinez is reviewing the case files now, and the surgical team is preparing the operating room." As they waited for the transport team to take Harper to pre-op, Victoria unexpectedly returned, now accompanied by a tall, elegant woman with dark hair streaked with silver, wearing surgical scrubs that somehow looked more professional than anyone else's. "Miss Parker, this is Dr. Gabriela Martinez." Victoria introduced them. The surgeon extended her hand with a warm smile that reached her eyes. "It's good to meet you, Miss Parker, and this must be my special patient, Harper." Harper looked up with wide eyes, suddenly seeming to understand that this moment was important. "Are you going to give me my super heart?" "That's exactly what I'm going to do," Dr. Martinez confirmed, her voice gentle but radiating confidence. She knelt down to Harper's level with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years talking to frightened children. "Your heart is already very special, but it needs a little help to work better. My job is to fix the parts that aren't working quite right." "Will it hurt?" Harper asked in a small voice. "You'll be fast asleep the whole time," Dr. Martinez promised. "When you wake up, your chest might feel sore, but we have special medicine to make sure you're comfortable." Harper seemed to consider this information carefully before nodding with the solemnity of a much older person. "Okay, Rexy says he'll be brave too." She held up her dinosaur plushie. "Rexy looks very brave," Dr. Martinez agreed seriously. "Now I need to go get ready, but I'll see you very soon, okay?" As Dr. Martinez stood to leave, Melissa touched her arm. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to articulate the depth of her gratitude for this woman who held her daughter's life in her skilled hands. The surgeon nodded, understanding passing between them. "We'll take excellent care of her." When the transport team arrived, with a gurney sized for a child, Melissa's carefully maintained composure finally threatened to break. This was the moment she had been dreading, saying goodbye to Harper before the surgery, not knowing what would happen next. "Remember what we talked about?" she asked, smoothing Harper's curls back from her forehead with trembling fingers. "The doctors are going to give you special medicine that will make you fall asleep, and when you wake up, I'll be right there waiting." Harper clutched Rexy tighter. "And my heart will be the super-est," Melissa confirmed, pressing a kiss to her daughter's cheek that tasted like tears. She didn't realize she was crying. "Yarr, I love you more than all the stars in the sky." Melissa said their usual exchange. Love you more than all the dinosaurs that ever lived, Harper replied automatically. As the gurney began to move, Harper kept her eyes locked on Melissa's until they rounded the corner toward the surgical ward. Melissa stood frozen in the empty hallway, her arm still halfway extended in a wave until Victoria gently touched her elbow. Come on, she said softly. I'll show you to the waiting area. The private waiting room was indeed much more comfortable than the general area, equipped with plush couches, a small kitchenette, magazines, and a large-screen television. Most importantly, it offered solitude, a place where Melissa could process her emotions without an audience of other worried families. Would you like me to stay with you? Victoria offered unexpectedly. Or I can have someone bring you coffee breakfast. Melissa shook her head, sinking onto one of the couches that probably cost more than her monthly salary. Thank you, but I think I just need to... She gestured vaguely, unable to articulate exactly what she needed beyond her daughter's safety. Victoria nodded understandingly. Of course. I'll check in later. The surgery will take about 5 hours. Left alone. Melissa finally allowed the tears she'd been holding back to fall. For 20 minutes she cried. For Harper's pain, for the unfairness of a child facing such serious health issues, for the financial burden that had nearly prevented this life-saving surgery, and finally, in gratitude for the unexpected intervention that had made today possible. Eventually, she collected herself and tried to focus on the novel she'd brought along, but the words blurred on the page. Instead, she found herself staring at her phone, checking the time every few minutes, even though she knew the surgery had barely begun. An hour into the wait, there was a soft knock at the door. Victoria entered carrying 2 cups of coffee and a small paper bag. I thought you might need this, she said, setting one of the coffees in front of Melissa. And there are some pastries in the bag. You should try to eat something. Thank you, Melissa said, surprised by the continued personal attention from the hospital's CEO. Don't you have other obligations today? Victoria took a seat in an armchair across from her, her movements graceful, but somehow weary. Nothing more important than this. The statement hung between them, loaded with an implication Melissa couldn't quite decipher. She took a sip of the coffee. It was excellent, clearly not from the hospital cafeteria, and studied Victoria more carefully. There was something familiar about the woman's features, something Melissa couldn't quite place. The shape of her eyes, perhaps, or the way she tilted her head when listening. And her level of personal investment in Harper's case continued to strike Melissa as unusual, even accounting for the publicity angle of the new cardiac initiative. May I ask you something personal? Melissa ventured, setting down her coffee cup. Victoria tensed slightly but nodded. You may ask. I reserve the right not to answer. Why are you really doing all this for us? The truth, please. Victoria's composed expression faltered momentarily, like a mask slipping for just an instant. She set her coffee cup down and seemed to wrestle with some internal decision. Finally, she reached into her pocket and withdrew a small, worn photograph, which she handed to Melissa without comment. The photo showed a young girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with wild curly hair and a missing front tooth. She was sitting in a hospital bed, smiling bravely at the camera, despite being connected to various monitors and machines. The resemblance to Harper was striking, not identical, but enough to make Melissa's breath catch in her throat. Her name was Charlotte, Victoria said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there moments before. My daughter. She had a congenital heart defect, very similar to Harper's. Melissa looked up sharply, the photograph suddenly feeling heavier in her hands. Victoria's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and for a moment the powerful CEO disappeared, replaced by a grieving mother. We couldn't afford the surgery she needed. This was 20 years ago, before I had any connections in the medical world, before I had the means to... She stopped, composing herself with visible effort. I'm so sorry. Melissa whispered, understanding beginning to dawn. After Charlotte died, I went back to school. Victoria continued, her voice growing stronger, but no less emotional. Got my MBA, worked my way up through hospital administration with a single goal: to ensure that no family would lose a child because of financial barriers to care. Her voice hardened slightly. The Children's Cardiac Care Initiative isn't new, Melissa. It's been my personal mission for 2 decades. What's new is that we finally have the board approval and initial funding to make it official. And Harper reminded you of Charlotte, Melissa said softly. Victoria nodded, reclaiming the photograph with gentle fingers. When Dr. Martinez brought her case to my attention when she mentioned the financial obstacles, she tucked the photograph back into her pocket. Yes, it was personal. I couldn't save my daughter, but I can help save yours. A heavy silence settled between them as the full weight of Victoria's revelation sank in. The revelation cast everything in a new light. Victoria's personal involvement, her insistence on the best care for Harper, the private waiting room, the way she'd steamrolled over hospital policies. This wasn't merely professional courtesy or a public relations opportunity. It was something far more profound, a mother trying to heal her own heart by mending another's. I didn't mean to burden you with my story, Victoria said finally, especially not today when you have enough on your mind. Melissa shook her head emphatically. It's not a burden. It helps me understand. She hesitated before adding, Thank you for sharing Charlotte with me. Victoria's smile was tinged with sadness, but also something lighter. You know what's strange? She would have been about your age now. Maybe she would have had children of her own by now. Before Melissa could respond, Victoria's phone buzzed. She checked it quickly, and her expression brightened. Dr. Martinez has sent an update. They've successfully begun the main repair. Everything is proceeding as expected. Relief washed over Melissa like warm water. That's good news. It is, Victoria agreed. Gabriella, Dr. Martinez, is truly exceptional. She trained at the most prestigious programs in the country, but chose to work here because she believes in accessible care for all children. How do you know her so well? Melissa asked, grateful for the distraction of conversation. Victoria's expression softened with memory. We met during my darkest days right after Charlotte. She was still a resident then, not involved in my daughter's case, but she saw me falling apart in the hospital chapel one night. Instead of offering empty platitudes, she simply sat with me in silence for hours. She paused, lost in the memory. When I eventually took this position at County General Recruiting, her was my first priority. The hours of surgery stretched on, marked by periodic updates from the operating room. Victoria remained with Melissa the entire time, sometimes engaging in conversation, other times simply providing quiet company as they both watched the clock. They shared stories. Melissa about Harper's fascination with space and dinosaurs, Victoria about hospital administration and her vision for more equitable health care. You've accomplished so much, Melissa observed during their 4th hour of waiting. Charlotte would be proud. Victoria's eyes widened slightly at the comment, as if the thought hadn't occurred to her. I'd like to think so, she said softly, though there's still so much work to be done. Shortly after the 5-hour mark, Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway, still wearing her surgical cap, but having changed out of her operating gown. Both women stood, immediately tension evident in their postures, despite the positive updates they'd been receiving. The surgeon's face broke into a tired but genuine smile. The surgery was successful. We've repaired the defect, and Harper's heart is responding beautifully. Melissa's knees weakened with relief, and she found herself supported by Victoria's steady hand at her elbow. She's okay, really okay. She's in recovery now, Dr. Martinez confirmed. Her vital signs are strong, and we didn't encounter any unexpected complications. The next 24 hours will be critical for monitoring, but I'm very optimistic about her full recovery. 6 months later, Harper raced across the playground at Lincoln Elementary with the boundless energy of a completely healthy 5-year-old. Her surgical scar had faded to a thin line that she wore like a badge of honor, telling anyone who would listen about her super heart and the brave doctors who had fixed it. Melissa watched from a bench, still occasionally marveling at the sight of her daughter running without getting tired, climbing jungle gyms without having to rest, living the normal childhood that had seemed impossible just half a year ago. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Board meeting went well. Initiative approved for expansion. 5 more children scheduled for cardiac procedures next month. Charlotte would love knowing Harper is thriving. Melissa smiled, typing back. Harper asks about Miss Victoria every week. She wants to show you her science project about hearts. Saturday afternoon, my office has better dinosaur books now. Perfect. The relationship that had begun in crisis had evolved into something deeper. Not quite friendship, but a connection forged by shared purpose and mutual respect. Victoria had kept her promise about the publicity for the cardiac initiative. Harper's story, carefully crafted to protect their privacy while illustrating the program's impact, had helped secure significant additional funding from both private donors and state healthcare initiatives. More importantly, it had opened doors for other families facing similar impossible choices between their child's life and financial ruin. 1 year later, Dr. Martinez published a paper in the Journal of Pediatric Cardiology highlighting the improved outcomes achieved when financial barriers to care were removed. Harper's case was featured prominently, though anonymously, as an example of how immediate access to optimal care could dramatically improve both short-term survival and long-term quality of life. The patient in question, Dr. Martinez had written, received surgery within the optimal window not because of insurance status or family wealth, but because of institutional commitment to pediatric cardiac care. The result speaks for itself: complete surgical success, no complications, and a child who will now live a full, healthy life. The paper became required reading in healthcare administration programs across the country. 2 years later, Victoria stood at the podium of the National Healthcare Equity Conference, delivering the keynote address to an audience of hospital administrators, politicians, and healthcare advocates. The Children's Cardiac Care Initiative at County General has now provided life-saving procedures to 47 children whose families could not otherwise afford care, she announced to enthusiastic applause. But this isn't about charity. It's about recognizing that access to healthcare is a fundamental right, not a privilege determined by economic status. In the audience, Melissa sat with Harper, now 7 years old, and fascinated by the idea of her story helping other children. Harper had insisted on wearing her favorite dress, bright blue with dinosaur patterns, because she wanted to look special for Miss Victoria's important speech. Every child saved through this initiative represents not just a medical success, but a moral imperative fulfilled, Victoria continued. We cannot claim to be a civilized society while allowing children to suffer or die from treatable conditions simply because their families lack financial resources. She paused her gaze, finding Melissa and Harper in the audience. Charlotte Collins would have been 27 years old today. She didn't survive because the system failed her family, but her legacy lives on in every child who receives care through programs like ours. Their survival is her memorial. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. 3 years later, on the anniversary of Harper's surgery, the three of them, Melissa, Harper, and Victoria, visited Charlotte's grave together. Harper, now 8 and wise beyond her years, had insisted on bringing flowers and a handwritten card. "Thank you for helping me get my Super Heart," she had written in careful second-grade handwriting. "I promise to help other kids too when I grow up. Love, Harper." Victoria knelt beside the small headstone, her fingers tracing Charlotte's name carved in granite. "She would have loved you," she whispered to Harper. "You have her courage." Later, as they walked back to their cars, Harper slipped her hand into Victoria's. "Miss Victoria, do you think Charlotte can see us from heaven?" "I think she can," Victoria replied, her voice steady. "And I think she's very proud of how many children we've helped because of her." "Good," Harper said, with the matter-of-fact certainty of childhood. "Because I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up and help fix kids' hearts just like Dr. Martinez fixed mine." 5 years later, the Children's Cardiac Care Initiative had expanded to 12 hospitals across 3 states, providing free or subsidized cardiac care to over 300 children. Medical schools began incorporating Victoria's protocol into their healthcare policy curricula, studying how institutional commitment could overcome systemic barriers to care. Harper, now 10, had indeed maintained her interest in medicine. She volunteered at County General's pediatric ward every Saturday, reading to younger patients and helping comfort families facing their own medical crises. Her science fair projects consistently focused on cardiac health, and she had already announced her intention to attend medical school. "Just like Dr. Martinez," she would tell anyone who asked. "So I can give other kids super hearts too." Melissa had returned to school herself, earning a degree in healthcare administration, with Victoria's encouragement and financial support through the hospital's employee education program. She now worked as a patient advocate at County General, helping families navigate the complex intersection of medical need and financial reality. On quiet days, she would sometimes walk past the billing department where Mr. Davis, long since transferred to a different position, had once told her that her daughter's life wasn't worth the hospital's risk. The office was now occupied by Sarah Chen, a young administrator who had been personally trained by Victoria in the principles of patient-centered financial counseling. The waiting room where Melissa had first met Victoria had been renovated and renamed the Charlotte Collins Family Resource Center, equipped with comfortable seating, children's play areas, and dedicated counselors to help families understand their options and access available resources. A small plaque near the entrance read, "In memory of Charlotte Collins and in celebration of all the children whose hearts have been healed through love, courage, and institutional commitment to equal care." On Harper's 10th birthday, Victoria presented her with a special gift, a stethoscope engraved with Dr. Harper and the date of her surgery. "Every heartbeat you hear through this," Victoria told her. "Remember that your heart beats not just for you, but for all the children who will benefit from the changes we've made together." Harper held the stethoscope reverently, understanding somehow that this moment was important beyond birthday presents. "I won't forget," she promised, "and I'll make sure no kid ever has to be scared about getting their heart fixed because their parents don't have enough money." That evening, as Melissa tucked Harper into bed, her daughter asked the question that had been building for months. "Mommy, what would have happened if Miss Victoria hadn't helped us?" Melissa considered the question carefully, wanting to be honest without frightening her daughter. "I don't know for certain," she said finally. "But I know that everything worked out because sometimes, when we need help the most, the right person appears at exactly the right time." "Like an angel," Harper mused. "Like an angel," Melissa agreed. "But Miss Victoria isn't really an angel, is she? She's just a person who decided to help." From the mouths of babes. "Yes, sweetheart, she's just a person who decided to help. But sometimes that's the most angelic thing of all." 10 years later, Dr. Harper Parker, she had chosen to keep both names, graduated from medical school with highest honors, specializing in pediatric cardiology. Her residency would be served at County General Hospital under Dr. Martinez, who was now chief of pediatric cardiac surgery. Victoria, now in her 70s, but still sharp and determined, attended the graduation ceremony. She had officially retired from hospital administration 2 years earlier, but remained active in healthcare policy advocacy and had established the Charlotte Collins Foundation to support similar initiatives nationwide. As Harper crossed the stage to receive her diploma, Victoria felt a presence beside her that had nothing to do with the crowded auditorium. Charlotte's spirit, perhaps, or simply the satisfaction of knowing that one child's tragedy had ultimately saved hundreds of others. After the ceremony, the three women, now spanning 3 generations, stood together in the same hospital lobby where Melissa had first heard Victoria say, "You and Harper are not alone in this." "We never were we?" Melissa reflected, watching her daughter, now Dr. Harper, excitedly discussing her upcoming residency with Dr. Martinez. "No," Victoria agreed. "We never were. And now hundreds of other families know they're not alone either." The circle was complete, but it was also ever expanding, reaching forward into a future where financial barriers would no longer determine which children lived and which died, where institutional courage would trump systemic indifference, and where the memory of one lost child would continue to save countless others. In the end, it wasn't about charity or even justice. It was about love. The love of a mother for her daughter, the love of a grieving woman for the child she couldn't save, and the love of a community that decided no family should face the impossible choice between life and financial ruin. Harper's superheart beat strong and steady, pumping hope into a healthcare system that had learned finally to put healing before profit and children's lives before bureaucratic convenience. And in the pediatric cardiac ward, a new plaque had appeared, the Harper Parker Children's Cardiac Unit, where every heart matters and every child deserves a chance at forever. The story continued, one heartbeat at a time.